Put that coffee down. Coffee's for closers only.
Oh, have I got your attention now?
Hey,
What's up? What's up?
hey, what's going on, Don?
How's it going, man?
Got my coffee brewing.
I got a cup right here in hand.
Nice,
So
buddy.
good.
Nice. So, hey, guys, welcome back. Coffee with Closers. Today is December 29th. This will be the last episode of 2021. We are excited to be here. Gavin is traveling today, so he may or may not be on, most likely not. But today's episode, I would like to try to keep this one a little shorter if we could, maybe around 30 or 40 minutes. And I really just wanted to kind of dive into some of the conversations that we're having with sellers, things that were like tips and tricks on, what we are using or what we're saying to sellers, how to talk to sellers, what's working, what to avoid, so on and so forth. So guys, if you are listening or watching us, feel free to drop a comment if you agree or disagree with something that Don and I say, or if you have a tip, we would love to share that information with the audience. Before we jump into that, Don, good morning, man. How are things?
Things are good, man. Quiet Christmas, chilled at home, and just mapping out, all the plans for 2022 this week, and using this week as much as I can. My instinct was to take this week off and chill. But I mentioned last week, I set a really big goal for the next 90 days. So I've been really kind of hunkering down this week and just mapping things out so I can hit the ground running.
Nice, man. I love that. That's something that we've been focusing on a little bit over the last few days too, is just trying to set up our goals and some plan for 2022. I mean, it's approaching. We only got a couple more days.
I agree. It's right around the corner.
Saturday night?
Saturday, we'll see. New Year's Eve is Friday, so Saturday is the 1st.
Nice. Saturday is the first day of 2022. We got to hit that ground running, man.
Yeah, most definitely. And it's time to run. It's time to run hard. So I'm trying to get a head start.
Yes, sir. I love it. Well, let's talk about conversations with sellers, the do's, the don'ts, how to position yourself. I just had an hour plus long call with one of my students this morning, and he's newer, he's younger, he's only like 17 or 18 years old, and he was asking me, what do you do whenever you are cold calling or cold texting somebody and they're asking 85 to 90% of the ARV? And I told him that 85 to 90% of the ARV in my eyes isn't really a deal, especially due to the fact that you're not taking out the cost of repairs, right? It costs 10% on average to sell a property, 10%. So if you have a property that has, let's just use really, really simple math here. It's got $100,000 ARV. And the property has 10 grand worth of repairs. If I'm going to be interested in buying that as an investor, not as a wholesaler, because a wholesaler's got to be even lower, but as an investor, I'm going to typically want to be at 80% of the ARV minus the repairs. So that would mean 100 times 0.8 puts me at 80, minus the 10,000 in repairs puts me at 70. And that's my MAO. And for those that are new and don't know what that means, that's the max allowable offer. So what that means is the most I can pay that person to make that deal even work is 70,000. But I'm going to probably go in and I'm going to offer 60 to 65 because I'm going to need room to negotiate up. So if somebody's asking 85, 90% of that number, that would mean they're asking 85 to 90,000. That doesn't make sense because there's 10 grand in repairs and there's a cost to sell. Don, what were you going to say?
No, I don't disagree with you. I think that there's an art to this that gets lost, and I'm even guilty of it from time to time when we're pumping leads through like a conveyor belt, right? and we're just trying to get through to the next appointment. A lot of times when you first have a conversation with a seller, they're going to either have a defensive wall up, or they're gonna throw a higher number out there. We're dealing with educated sellers, whether you're a car salesman or selling TVs at Best Buy, or you're buying houses these days. The people we deal with, between Google and YouTube and all the other resources out there in Zillow, they're not in the dark by any means. So, but what you got to uncover in these conversations is really why you're even having the conversation. Because if they're on the phone with you, if they're not listing with an agent, or going the traditional route of selling, and they're on the phone with you, chances are there's an underlying something that's keeping them from going the traditional route. They're in a hurry. There's a condition issue with the property. There's some kind of pain point going on in their world, in their life. And so we hear, oh, they want 85 or 90% of ARV. And we go, oh, that's a cold lead. And we go on to the next lead without really having the conversation of, why are you even calling me? Like, why are we having this conversation? What is it that's going on that's making you want to sell right now? Why aren't you going the traditional route? What is it about the property that, is making you not want to keep it? And having that conversation. And when you start to, when you are less in a hurry and more about solving problems, and you start to kind of have those conversations and peel back the onion, you start to realize that these individuals, these sellers, are going to usually have some kind of underlying something that is driving the reason why they're even having a conversation with you. And therefore, chances are, it's not so much about the price that they're going to get for the property. It's how that problem is going to be solved in the least painful way. And we forget that. We all forget that. I've been doing this for 20 years, and I'll still have a conversation and sometimes forget that. And so I think that's something that really needs to hit home when we're talking to people who are new and they get stopped at that wall of, well, the seller wants 85 or 90%. You got to understand that your job is to break through that wall and find out why you're even having the conversation. And maybe it becomes more about, like, one of the other tricks that I use, instead of talking about, well, you want 90 grand. Well, what is it you need to walk with? Like, really, what are you trying to do? Trying to buy a car, trying to get a new place? Like, what are you trying to walk with? Oh, well, I'd like to walk with 20 grand. Well, how much do you owe on the property? Well, I owe 50. Okay. Well, if I can get you 20 grand in your pocket and I can pay all other fees and closing costs, would that make you happy? Absolutely. Well, now the price became 70 instead of 20. Instead of 90, I'm sorry. Yep. So, there's a lot of ways to peel back that onion and get to really what problem it is they want to solve. And it's not always about that big number that stops you in your tracks. So.
That's a great point. I think also there's a little bit difference in the way you approach the seller. And you had mentioned, why are you calling me? Mm-hmm. And if they're calling you, then yes, obviously, right? But if you're cold calling or cold texting them,
100%,
they're not calling you. So it's it's just a different scenario. But at that point, you're calling or texting them. You're the one opening up that conversation. So you have to approach that a little bit differently. But trying to get to the why, assuming they have motivation, is always going to be your best course of direction. Mm-hmm. Always, right? Because if you can determine the why, then you can try to help solve the problem, like you just did in that scenario. Great work of saying, what is it that you really want or need? Let's push and move towards that goal and create a win-win scenario here. So the student that I was talking to, he's not doing any online marketing. He's not doing any direct mail. He's not posting ads or doing billboards or radio or doing anything that's going to essentially get his phone ringing. All of his marketing efforts are outbound. So he asked me, he said, how do you know if they're worth adding to the CRM to follow up with? Because again, they're not calling you, you're calling them. And a lot of people are asking full retail, which could be a prop stream or a Zestimate or a batch estimated number, or they're asking slightly below, or in some cases, slightly above, right? And again, they're not calling you, you're calling them. So what I told him and my response was, well, just try to figure out their why. First and foremost, do they have interest in selling? If they don't, thank them for their time and move on, right? Because this is a numbers game.
It's still the same. It's still the same question though. It's like it just the caveat would be why are you entertaining this conversation? Like,
You're exactly right. So then why? That's where I'm going. Why? Yeah. Why are you entertaining this conversation? What is it that that you're going to be able to accomplish or solve by selling this property? So you always want to get to the why when you are talking to the sellers. What is their why? And if their why is I'm just shopping for an offer, it's not a motivated why. It's not somebody that I'm truly going to want to, spend a bunch of time and resources following up with. And then what we talked about, Don, was there's a big difference between somebody wanting to sell and somebody that needs to sell. And if somebody wants to sell and they're reasonable about the number that they're willing to sell it at, well, then of course we're gonna offer convenience to them. We're gonna put them into the CRM. We're gonna follow up with them. If somebody needs to sell, again, also they need to be reasonable on that number. We're gonna add them into the CRM. But if somebody just wants to sell and they're not reasonable, personally, I don't add those into the CRM to follow up with them unless I have a feeling or I see some reason that they may change their mind. And I think his question to me this morning, Don, was, well, what if they're asking over retail? They don't need to sell. They're just wanting to sell. So people doesn't really make sense to me. What's your take?
I think it depends on your machine, right? Like if you're a one man or woman show, then you're going to want to sift a little better than somebody like me. For instance, everything goes into my CRM for follow-up, everything, because I have VAs that do the follow-up, and I have somebody in my office that's getting on the phone and calling, and I'm not having to be as particular about my time. So in that particular situation, to me, everything between it's already sold and basically that's it. It goes into the CRM because people's situation changes. It changes 6 months later, a year later, and I have the capability of doing follow-up for the next 3, 4, 5 years. If you're newer and you're a one man or one woman show, then you're going to want to be a little pickier with the things you put in your CRM and you're doing follow-up with, because your time is a lot more valuable. So I agree with that advice. You can see the scribble kind of on the side of this, but I actually started mapping out. I whiteboard, and here it's like who's calling you or who you're calling, and I had want but not need. That was when you're just talking about, and it goes through, and it's like it depends heavily on condition of the property, their timeline. It's like you really got to think about the seller situation and what's going to affect. Like they want to sell, but they don't need to sell. Okay, so why are they entertaining the conversation? What timeline? If they were, are they going to even want to have this conversation? What's the condition of the property that could impact, their pain point down the road, or a problem that is lingering but isn't a problem today. So those are all things that that need to come into consideration as you're talking to sellers and trying to flesh out, is this a valuable conversation for me to have right now? Is this something I should put in follow up, or is this something I should just kick the can down the road and not even deal with?
Yep, and I agree completely. And I'm in the same boat. I have VAs that help. So, more times than none, or more than less, of course, we're going to add these into the system as well. But because again, things change, right? And we want to be there for those people. But if somebody is asking over retail, they're not reasonable, and I don't sense any level of motivation, to me, it's going to depend on, did they call us? Because if they do, it's going to get added to the CRM instantly anyway, because it's a lead that came in, right? So in that case, we may not mark it as dead. We may put a 6-month follow-up on it or a 1-year follow-up, of course. But if we're doing the prospecting, we're doing the cold calling, we're doing the cold texting or the door knocking or whatever it might be, and they are at or above retail and there isn't any signs of motivation, personally, we don't add those. We don't add those in. It just doesn't necessarily seem to be the best use of our time. But I think you said it really well, is it's going to depend on how big your team is and how much time you're willing to put in. And you don't even have to have a team. If you're willing to do all those follow-ups, then great, go do them, of course. But yeah, knowing what somebody wants versus what somebody needs is going to be a big, reason to determine if they're going to go or not. If they're going to,
and just for the systems and technical side of things, any CRM that you're going to use, it's worth its weight. You're going to tag sellers warm, cold, hot. And
correct.
so, for instance, this is somebody that wants over retail. It's not really worth my time, but I've had a conversation with them. So I'm gonna go ahead and put them in the CRM. I'm gonna tag them cold. And then you can also, you usually say, okay, 90-day follow-up, 1-year follow-up or whatever. So you can also tag, how long it's going to be for follow-up. You can put them in automated follow-up. There's a lot of things you can do with the CRM. But the point I want to make is one of the things we do is we'll segment out. Like we'll go through and we'll call all of our warms, in a period of time. We'll go through, we'll call all of our colds, or we'll call a particular marketing campaign, and we'll go through and we'll say, okay, the next 8 days, we're going to call this particular marketing campaign because it's going to take us 8 days based on the math we have and how many calls a day we can do to get through that marketing campaign. So you could still put it in your CRM and tag it as cold and just know that until you have somebody on your team 6 months, a year later, you're not even going to bother with your cold leads. So that's another perspective. I just wanted to kind of throw it out there that utilizing your CRM properly as a tool, and you can sift through like what you want to spend time on and what is like, okay, I'm going to let that age. And when I have a team or I have time or I'm bored, I can tackle that. So I just want to throw that in there.
I love it, man. I agree. And I love it.
Yeah.
All right. So guys, what are we really trying to do when we're on the phone with the seller? We're trying to determine their level of motivation. And Don, you said it really, really well. We're just trying to find out why. Why are they entertaining selling this property, right? So I always typically ask, usually within the first 30 seconds, why do you want to sell this property? And the why will typically tell you their level of motivation. Well, I want to move. I want to sell the property, because I want to move down the street, right? Not really super motivated. If their number is a good number, well, then we're gonna entertain that conversation and we're gonna keep talking. But if their why is I inherited the property, it's in Missouri, and I live in Florida, well, then it's like, okay, well, there's a level of motivation there. If they owe a bunch of taxes on the property and they can't keep up, that's a good level of motivation. If it's in pre-foreclosure or about to be foreclosed on, and they're at risk of losing the property, there's a high level of motivation there. Death, divorce, disease, the 3 Ds, those typically have high levels of motivation. So I'm typically always asking them why they want to sell, because I want to determine the cause, which essentially tells me if that motivation is high or if that motivation is low. Now, if you ask somebody why they want to sell, and this happens from time to time, and they say, well, that's not your business, then, okay, no problem. When? That's always my go-to question if they don't tell me the why. And the reason is the when often uncovers the why. So let me give you an example here. Mr. or Mrs. Seller, I would love to, to make an offer on this property and, maybe even come out and look at the property. But I just was curious, why are you looking to sell it? Why are you entertaining selling this property? And they say, well, we're not really, looking to talk about that. Okay, no problem. When do you want to sell? That's my next question. And then they'll typically say, well, we'd like to have this thing sold in 30 days because our next property, we're going to need it. And it's like, you just told me the why without asking the why. The when will often disclose the why. Not always, but it can. And I've had situations where I'll ask people, hey, why do you want to sell? And they'll be like, it's not your business. And then I'll say, well, okay, well, when would you like to sell? And they say, well, I have to sell this by next Thursday because I'm going to be in jail on Friday.
Yeah.
It'll open up that door without asking that particular question.
But what you're saying is, if I can reframe it a little bit, is don't be so robotic in the script and just have a conversation with people and maybe ask the question differently. And so just because they told you no once, this doesn't mean they're going to tell you no if you ask it a different way. And that's, again, part of a lot of newer people will hit a wall and stop.
Yep.
And so it's the other issue that people really run into is, and I think that you'll feel me on this because you and I have been doing this for so long that, we don't need a script. Like, it's just natural. We know what we need to ask. If we forget to ask, we'll call them back. It's not that big of a deal. A lot of people, they'll get hung up on the script and they'll be so worried about the next thing they have to say or ask that they're not listening to what the seller is saying. They're not listening for opportunity. They're not listening for opportunity to dig in or need or if they get told no, they're not thinking of a different way to attack the same question. And so, and you just said it. It's like, okay, they're not going to tell you why, but the when will usually answer the why. Or for instance, like they won't say how much they'll owe on a property. Hey, how much is your mortgage? That's none of your business. Okay. Well, if I was to throw a number out at like 90 grand for that property, would that be a conversation you're willing to have? Well, if I took 90, I'd only be walking with 20 grand and I really need to walk with 30. And then you're like, well, you just told me you owed 70 on the property. So if you're listening to what they're telling you, a lot of times they're telling you all the answers to your questions without you ever really asking.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
I love it, man. I agree 100%. I love it. So one of the things that I've been doing, I would say, the first 2 years of me doing this business full time, and I'm approaching about 8 years full time at this point. The first 2 years, I was trying to force people to be motivated, and I was chasing people, hoping that I could somehow have, influence over their level of motivation. And I realized that after 2 years of that I have zero control over somebody else's motivation. What I do have, though, is the ability to follow up and to make friends with these people and to be there for them when they are ready. Right. And I think that that's been something that has really helped me. So what does that really mean? Well, personally, I've gotten really, really good at disqualifying myself as being a retail buyer versus the flip side of that would be to try to convince them, right, that they should take my offer, right? Instead of me wasting 30 or 40 or 50 minutes on the phone with somebody just for them to say, okay, well, your offer is too low. Thanks for your time. Instead, what I like to do is relatively quickly on each of these phone calls is I introduce myself and I say, hey, I'm Dave. I'm with House Sold Easy. And I'll say, I'm looking to buy properties that I can add value to and rent out or fix up for a profit. All right. This is a business. And I think a lot of new people, they hide behind the fact that they are not, or that they are trying to make a profit. They hide behind that. I lead with it. And basically, why do I do that, Don? I do it because I want to disqualify myself as being somebody that's going to pay an outrageous retail price, right? Instead of wasting 30 or 40 minutes on the phone and then them tell me that this is the number and they can't go below it. Instead, I just disqualify myself as somebody that pays retail. I'm not asking for massive discounts. Not at all. But what I will tell them is, hey, I would love to buy your house, but I don't need it. And I think a lot of people that are listening or watching are thinking, man, that's kind of counterintuitive. But it's not. Because I don't need to buy any of the houses. I bought 160 houses this year, I think, roughly. I didn't need to buy any of them. Not one. Mm-hmm. I didn't need any of those houses. But I'm transparent about that. I say, I would love to buy this house from you if we can make a win-win. And I don't pay retail. And I'm typically looking for houses that need a bunch of work that I can add value to them somehow, some way, so I can rent them for a profit or fix them up and sell them for a profit. Again, I do not hide behind that. And if they have a problem with me making a profit, wouldn't you want to know that in 3 minutes versus 40? Absolutely. Get off the phone with that seller. Move on to somebody who does want the services that we can provide. What's your rebuttal to that?
No, I think that's fair. I can't say that I've used that in the past, and maybe we should, especially when we do the cold calling leads. So, telling somebody, hey, look, I'm not a retail buyer. I'm in the business to buy, fix, and flip and for a profit, or buy a rental for a profit. And, knowing that, are you still willing to continue the conversation with me? I think is a very fair way of just kind of putting the elephant in the room out on display, and allowing everybody to kind of know where we stand. Because then they say, yeah, I definitely want to continue this conversation, or I want to hear what you have to say. And that means there's something there. Again, why are they on the phone with you?
Right.
So, if, I was talking to a guy yesterday, Brisa handed me a handful of stuff yesterday to call through. And I was talking to a guy yesterday, had 3 properties in Southern California, all over $1 million. And I said, we're cash buyers. We're not, essentially, I didn't say, we're not retail buyers, but I said, we're not the guys going to pay the most. We're going to pay all cash. We're going to be quick. We're going to, we're a problem solver. And he said, I don't even know what that means. He's like, all cash doesn't mean anything to me, whether it comes from your bank account or you get a loan from the bank and it comes from the bank. He's like, it's the same to me. And right there, it's like, okay, true. Well, this guy isn't a motivated seller, And so we had a couple more words exchanged with each other, and I threw out some, kind of ballpark numbers to kind of anchor him. And he said, basically, there's no reason for me to even entertain that. He's like, I don't need to sell right now. So, it was at that point in time, we knew that it was a waste of both of our times to continue the conversation. So why he even entertained the conversation, I don't know. But at this point in time, he made it very, very clear that he's not motivated. He's not in a hurry. However long it takes, he's fine with it. And he wants to get the most he can for the properties. So I would say I probably wasted about 5 minutes longer than I would have if I would have used your line.
Hey, that's okay though. That's all right. Yeah, exactly. I have been really good lately about understanding that as a real estate investor, I'm not saying a wholesaler, I'm not saying a landlord, I'm not saying a fix and flip rehabber. I'm saying a real estate investor. That the tools that I have in my belt typically funnel down into convenience. That's what I can offer people. It's not money.
Right.
Let's break down the convenience for a second. I mean, typically there's 3 things that I can offer people to make their life really convenient. And the way I look at it is those 3 things probably make up 70 to 80% of the conveniences that people want. There's hundreds of ways to make somebody's life convenient, right? You could do anything to help somebody and make their life convenient. But the 3 things that typically make up the majority are going to be paying cash, which you had mentioned earlier, quick, and quick is a relative term, 2, 3, 4 weeks versus 2, 3, 4 months.
Well, some people don't want quick. Sometimes you say close in 7 days. They're like, well, I don't want you to close in 7 days.
Right. And the third thing, Don, is as is. And when I say as is, I'm not just referring to them not having to do repairs. I'm referring to them not even having to declutter, clean, and not have to do repairs. And those 3 things typically, and you may have more, of course. I mean, there's a bunch, hundreds of things we can do to offer convenience to people. But what I keep coming back to is that's really what value I have as an investor, regardless of what my exit strategy is, to try to help somebody. And in exchange for those conveniences, I demand a discount. So it's one of these things where if they're willing to give me a big discount, I'm going to go out of my way to offer them a ton of convenience to match that, make it a win-win scenario. But if they're not willing to give me a bunch of a decent discount, then I'm going to pull back on my level of convenience that I'm offering to them. Go ahead.
No, that's actually a great rebuttal, because I think a lot of people will hear, oh, you're just trying to lowball me. That's an objection you get from a seller from time to time is, oh, you're just trying to lowball me. And ultimately, I think that saying, like when somebody says, oh, you're just trying to lowball me, and you say, hey, No, actually, I'm not. I'm a solution to a problem. I'm convenient. I'm going to be able to close on your terms. I'm going to be able to take the property in the condition it is without you making any repairs. And I'm going to be able to take the property with whatever you want to leave behind. You just take what you want and leave the rest behind. And that's what I'm offering you. And for that, I am looking for a discount. And so, it's definitely, what I don't want to do is make you feel like I'm lowballing you. But I am providing some convenience here. So what I'd like to do is create a win-win situation. And I think that's a great rebuttal to that, because we hear that sometimes, you just want to lowball me, or they'll be like, well, I don't want to give you my number because, all you're going to do is this or that. And that's actually, what you said would be a great comeback. So anybody who's watching this, who hears that, put that in your mental registry as, an objection handler.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And here's the thing, guys, there's a bunch of other conveniences. Like, let's just rattle off a couple of things that we've done real quick to help sellers. I've paid for moving companies.
So we.
I have showed up to people's houses and helped them load the car. Mm-hmm. Yesterday, I did that. Oddly enough, I went to their house. I changed the locks. We signed the docs, and they had 20 duffel bags full of clothes and shit. And I just helped them load it into their car for them. I was happy to help. We have paid the first month's rent on people's apartments. Now, we're not co-signing or nothing like that, but we've helped get them out of properties. I've hired locksmiths to access properties when the seller doesn't live in the city or the state. Mm-hmm. We will go above and beyond to cover closing costs and some people. But over the years, it typically comes down to those three things that make up the majority. Cash. And that your rebuttal earlier, or your comment earlier, is so true. To a sophisticated person, cash, it doesn't matter where it comes from. It comes from a line of credit or a private lender or a hard money lender or a bank loan. Cash is cash, right? Yeah. But it doesn't necessarily come with strings attached to hire an agent and deal with showings and then manage the inspection process and manage the appraisal process and manage the cost of holding and manage the cost and cover the closing costs and the seller concessions that result from the inspection repairs. It's a lot of inconveniences to do all that. So when we say cash, we're really more so not referring to the money. We're referring to the convenience of getting paid quickly, which leads me into number 2, which is quick, relatively quick.
Well, it's close on your terms. Yeah.
2.5 to 3 weeks. I'd say closer to 3 weeks even, but that's extremely fast compared to 3 or 4 months.
But it could even be like we've had sellers want to open up escrow now and wait 2 or 3 months to close.
And that's fine too.
Yeah, and a lot of buyers, this is where you flip that. Well, I provide that convenience because a lot of buyers won't do that. If they're going to open the escrow, they're going to close. Yeah, quick
doesn't necessarily always mean fast. Mm-hmm. It's if you want fast, we can do that. But if you want more time, we can do that too.
Yeah,
it's really, we'll close on the day that makes sense for you, assuming it's not today or tomorrow, because we can't do that.
The problem may be simply that I just need to know it's done. I need to know that we're in escrow. I need to know that this problem is solved while I'm in the process of relocating or looking for a new place or doing whatever it is I have to do, so that I'm not caught off last minute with trying to find a buyer for this property. And that may be as simple as that. So, that's one of our lines especially when you get a seller that says, call me back after the first of the year. And we go, hey, we can open up escrow right now, get the process started. You can do whatever you need to do, and we can wait till after the first of the year before we even get the process of actually closing on this property started. And that's something we do as well. And we do extended escrows. We've done 6-month escrows. So
we buy properties and rent them back to people.
Yeah, you got to be careful with that in some states, and they're in foreclosure, though. I want to just stress that, because that is, in some states, you can ask me how I know. You can get sued. You can end up with issues. If they're in any kind of distress or default and you rent back to them, check your state laws before you do it. And just out of good business, if they're in any kind of distress or default, even if the state allows you to do it, it's funny how many people will bite the hand that feeds them. So,
So you know how we typically try to do those down is is we don't actually even collect rent from them. What we'll do is we will have them put $5 or $10 or $15,000 in escrow, so the rent is prepaid. And then what we'll tell them is if they're out within 30 days, they get all of the escrow back.
Mhm.
So it
Yeah.
incentivizes them to leave, right?
Yeah.
If they aren't out on the 31st day, 2,000 or 1,000 or 1,500 or whatever the reasonable rent from the escrow that we paid in, even though it's essentially going to be delivered to them, assuming everything goes as planned, will be released to us. So all of the rent, and this is not every scenario, but we shoot to do this as much as we possibly can, right? But we try to get usually 10 to 15,000 in escrow, and then we basically say, hey, we'll give you a month to move. But beyond that, of that money that's there, we're going to start drawing from it. And there's a contract that everybody signs that we give to the title company. So when it comes time to distribute, are they out? No, they're not out. It's very simple. They distribute that. But it incentivizes them because every day or week or month that they stay, that escrow amount is dwindling. It's less that they're going to get. And most of the time, people, when we do that type of scenario, I would say 90+% of the time, they want as much of that money out of that escrow account. So they're in a hurry to get out. Right. But I agree. You got to be careful renting back to certain people when they're in certain types of distress. Absolutely.
Yeah. No, we do escrow holdbacks all the time. We do the same thing. And the caveat with us is you just got to communicate. We want, you have a contract date to be out by a certain date. If you communicate with us and let us know you need a couple extra days, we're going to work with you. If we can't get a hold of you, then, we're going to charge you. And that's always how we handle that one. So I totally agree with the escrow holdbacks. It's a good tool when somebody needs an extra 30 days to move into a new place or to get a place ready, or maybe they're having a house built. So we do it all the time.
I love it, man. I love it. Give me a couple more pro tips here, Don. We got about another 5 to 10 minutes before we wrap up today. What are some of the tricks that you have up your sleeve when you're talking to a seller that will help the listeners and the viewers either A, determine, level of motivation, or B, close these people on the phone?
When I'm doing, like when I ran appointments, I'll jump on calls now and I will do closings. It's a little different for me at this point in time because I'm usually getting something that has a certain degree of rapport built to it before it's handed to me. But listening, a lot of people fail to listen, and I always say that if you ask enough questions and you shut your mouth and listen, the seller will tell you exactly how to close them. And it's so true. And like I said, we're so worried about what we need to say next or sounding intelligent or, that we're not listening to what the seller's telling us. And there's been so many times where, I'm just having a conversation with the seller and they'll, they may be telling me their life story. And some people think, well, why am I going to waste my time listening to the seller's story? Let's just get to the business. But in that story, they're telling me like, this is my problem. This is my situation. This is what I need you to resolve. This is the timeline I needed it resolved in. And they're giving you they're removing any opportunity for an objection. They're giving you ammunition to utilize in your close. And, you'll say, okay, well, this is number 9 close here. And they'll say, well, no, I'm not sure about that. Let me think about that. Well, you want to think about it, but you just told me 5 minutes ago that XYZ is going on and I'm going to solve that for you. What is there really to think about? So shut up and listen. Don't worry about the damn script. 90% of the requests I get are, do you have a script for this or do you have a script for that? And just have a friggin' conversation, find out what the need is, be a human being, talking to a human being, trying to solve their problem, and you're going to go a long way.
I love it. I agree. Listen to what they say because they're going to typically tell you how they want to be closed. I love it, man. I agree completely. So one of the things that I want to also add to that is people want to do business with those that they know, they like, and they trust. Mm-hmm. And when you're on the phone with somebody, getting them to know you is pretty easy. Getting them to like you is a little bit more difficult. Getting them to trust you is going to be the hardest part typically. But what I found is getting somebody to know you, like you, and trust you, all of those things are going to be much easier if they do the majority of the talking.
Right. There's a book called How to Win.
You a lot more than if you were doing all the talking because they're going to feel like you're pushy or whatever the case might be. I love it, man.
There's a book called How to Win Friends and Influence People. I didn't mean to step on you talking, Dave. That I think anybody watching this, if you haven't read it already, read it. It's an older book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. And there's a section in there where it says that basically, if you let somebody talk about themselves, they spend all their time talking about themselves, they're going to love you.
Yeah.
I'm paraphrasing it, but it's true.
It's so true. It's very, very true. I love it. Well, Don, with that, let's wrap it up. I have a guy that just showed up that I got to go work with here. But this was a great episode, guys. Don't forget to hit that like button. Subscribe if you're watching on YouTube for future videos. And we are here every week, same time, same place. Thanks for watching. Don, as always, it's been a pleasure. And with that, we'll wrap it up.